Welcome to the Brainiate Show, where we talk about all things Salesforce, sharing the coolest features, solutions, and best practices to turn you into a Salesforce rock star. Here's your host, former attorney turned Salesforce consultant and trainer, David Giller.
Okay, I don't know why it gets stuck. Hello and welcome to all of you. Happy Tuesday. I hope you are all doing well. I am really excited to be here today because today we're going to be talking about a topic that is really painful for a lot of people. And that topic is how to turn your biggest complainers into your biggest cheerleaders. I think as Salesforce professionals, we have all been there before, where we are working hard on a particular project, we are trying to solve a particular business problem, we're building out custom functionality, maybe automation, maybe even working on some third-party apps that we've worked hard to get the licenses for and to set it up, and we've trained the users and we've migrated all of the data. And then what happens? Nothing but complaints. The folks that you rolled this out to, the folks who are supposed to benefit the most from this project, instead of appreciating, just even saying thank you for building all of this out, instead of actually using the system that you built out for them, instead what they're doing is they're complaining. And they're still using the old ways, whether it was spreadsheets or paper notepads or the old legacy system that existed before, as if you never did anything. So it's really frustrating. I've certainly been there many times myself, so I know exactly what it's like. It's really frustrating to be in this situation, and that's what we're going to unpack today. And many folks who focus their careers as Salesforce professionals focus very heavily on getting the certifications and understanding the functionality and understanding the business problems, the internal processes, the teams, all the synergies between the way different folks work within the organization. They take their project management skills very seriously, but nobody ever taught them anything about how to deal with this element, which in a lot of ways feels like more like a corporate therapist and a psychologist than being a Salesforce professional, than being a Salesforce admin. And like in a lot of ways, it feels like it has nothing to do with project management. But the reality is, for any, and this holds true way outside of Salesforce also, this holds true for any aspect of life, actually. Any change that we're going to introduce anywhere to anything requires people being aware of the change, people being open to the change, people accepting that change. And it's okay to complain. Like if things aren't good, of course you should complain. You should give feedback. You should, provide the insight on here's what's needed in order to improve whatever change we just introduced. But to, at the very least, attempt to embrace it and move forward with it. And by the way, even if for whatever reason, I'm not at all saying all change is good, not necessarily. How many times have we logged into a system, let's say, see the newest version of Outlook, or see a new navigation for any, pick your favorite app, whatever it is, and you're thinking, who the hell changed that? Like, why would they do that? It's more confusing now than it was before. So I'm not at all saying that every single change by definition is good. A lot of times the change that is being introduced is not that intuitive. Sometimes it's downright nonsensical. Sometimes you're thinking, what were they smoking? When, like, who introduced me to the person who came up with this idea? I'd like to smack them across the head. So I'm not at all saying all change is good. But even if the thing that you're trying to change is bad, to turn it into a constructive conversation, to get an understanding from the people who are complaining about it, why they are complaining about it, what are the problems associated with it, so that you as the Salesforce professional can pivot, can take the appropriate corrective action in order to address the problems that they have, the issues that they have. And that's really what I'm talking about when I'm saying turn the biggest complainers into your biggest cheerleaders. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And usually I have, as many of you know, usually I have a screen share element that's associated, that's part of this show. Today, there's nothing, I'm not going to show you how to do anything in Salesforce at all, because I think there's a lot to unpack here. And this topic can just downright kill the smallest project as well as the biggest project. There are companies that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, on Salesforce projects, and those projects went flat after they quote unquote went live because of this particular issue. So this issue is so darn important that I am focusing on nothing but this topic for this particular show. So let's go ahead and jump right in. And I'm going to be, of course, why did I do that? Okay, hang on one second. Let's go all the way back. So as you can see over here, there are not even that many slides to this entire presentation, but there's a lot to unpack over here. So we're talking about how to turn your naysayers into your biggest cheerleaders. And what we're really talking about is Salesforce change management techniques. It's all about managing change within the context of Salesforce, because that's what we're focusing on for our career, and managing change within the organization. So here's what we're going to be unpacking as it relates to this topic. So the first thing that we're going to unpack is what is change management, and why should we even care about it? Like, isn't my job as a Salesforce professional to just know like how to convert our workflow rules into flows, how to convert our process builders into flows, or migrating our data, or training our users on how to use the system, or building the next integration, learning Apex? Maybe, but you really need to know about this also. We're going to talk about the 5 steps of change management. We're going to talk about how to implement change management in your own projects. We're also going to be talking about the 8 tips that you can leverage in order to help your users adapt to new change within your environment. We're going to talk about 3 of the common challenges with change management and how you can overcome them. And we're going to be talking about the benefits of successful change management. Now, by the way, at any point, if you've got any questions whatsoever, feel free to just drop them in the comments. Just put a Q at the beginning of it. This way I know when I'm focusing on the questions. This way I know what is an actual question versus anything that you might be simply responding to somebody else's comment or question. So without further delay, let's move on along. So what is change management and why should we care about it? Well, in the end, as Salesforce professionals, we need to be particularly aware of change management because our users are constantly inundated with new features, new processes, even internal business processes, and new systems, even things that have nothing to do with Salesforce. Think of it for a minute. For many of us as Salesforce admins, we ourselves are overwhelmed each time Salesforce announces that a new seasonal release is coming up. How many of us are either completely drowning in trying to figure out what features are included with the latest release, or we are so overwhelmed to try to keep up with all the features included in the next release that we don't even bother checking on what features are included in the summer release. So even more so, our end users are overwhelmed with even the tiniest change, not only those features, those enhancements, those modifications to the system that Salesforce is introducing, whether we like it or not, but also those even the tiniest changes that we are introducing Just even, let's say, on the contact page layout, taking the phone number field and moving it from one side of the screen to the other side of the screen. And we don't tell our users about it. And they're really overwhelmed by it. And they're like, where the heck is the phone number? I know every time. But up until today, I would go over here on this side and I would look at the phone number, and now it's not there anymore. Or we, as an admin, we go ahead and we change a list view for the benefit of our team. We're not doing it just for the heck of it. We're not doing it because we're control freaks. We're changing a list view that our users are relying on. And those users, they then go and they click onto that list view, and the columns are different, or the display is different, or a filter is different. And that happens to them every single day, usually multiple times a day. They are overwhelmed to begin with. And more often than not, we are not addressing those change management issues. So just think about how beaten up those business users feel without us even doing anything as it relates to like a project of any kind, anything big and meaningful and significant. So if we are not careful, they will be so completely overwhelmed that they're simply going to push back, and they're going to say, stop changing the system. It took me up until now to get used to it, to understand where to find the things that I need to find. Because guess what? As business users, they don't really care about Salesforce. The folks in sales, you want to know what they care about? The folks in sales, they care about finding their customers and their prospects and their deals in their pipeline. The folks in customer support, they care about finding the cases that they need to work on and which ones do they need to focus on first, how to prioritize those cases. They couldn't care less about page layouts. They don't care about integrations. They don't care about what automation you built or didn't build. And by us introducing those changes, even when we have the best of intentions in mind for the end users, we're really overwhelming them. So we need to understand that, and we need to take that into account with all of the things that we do. So it really starts with empathy, to understand where our end users are coming from. They're not complaining that Excel is better because Excel has more features. They're complaining that Excel is better because you are not logging into Excel to move around their columns and their rows and changing the colors and the fonts and everything else on them. Like nobody else is going in and changing it. So that's why they're more comfortable with things like Excel. I've had users tell me that they don't even want to use Excel because, it's getting saved in a shared network folder. In theory, someone can go in and make changes to their Excel spreadsheet, that they prefer to use a paper notepad and paper files in a file cabinet because they know that nobody else is going to go into the file cabinet and change their papers. And whatever they put in those notes, they will stay until the next time that person goes to pull that paper out of the file cabinet. So it's more about consistency. It's more about not having folks intrude to sort of, imagine it's sort of like a total stranger just walks in to your office, to your desk, and just moves things around, maybe takes some things away, drops other things on your desk where you're trying to work, and just walks out. That's really frustrating. So just imagine how it feels for our end users when they are experiencing this on a regular basis. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about the 5 steps of change management. By the way, none of these are rocket science. They're not, but they do need, for us as admins, it takes a little bit of time and effort to understand these concepts, and even more so to learn how to implement these concepts on a regular basis. So the first one is the pre-change phase. So before we actually go ahead and implement any type of change, we need to first get an understanding of what is it that's going to change, and prepare those people, the people impacted, and prepare ourselves for the change. So to walk through this and make this a little bit more real, let's use an example. And let's use an example of not even that like someone came up with like a new business process that we want to implement, or we as Salesforce admins found a cooler way of doing things, or found a cool app that we want to implement. Let's make believe that we're working in an industry like, for example, it could be real estate, it could be healthcare, it could be education, an industry that is regulated by some government entity. And A new law is coming into place where, let's say, every 6 months, we need to, when we are providing a certain kind of service to a particular type of individual, every 6 months, we need to, let's say, do a survey, a questionnaire. Maybe it's even an in person interview. We need to capture specific responses from these individuals, and maybe we need to even file it with the government every 6 months. So this might be a change that not only our business users are not looking forward to, we also are not looking forward to it. No one is excited about this new change that's coming down. But whether we like it or not, it is coming. It is going to land on our lap, and we need to comply with it if we still want to stay in business. So again, going back to the first step, the pre-change phase, we need to understand for ourselves exactly what is it that's going to change? Where are we today? Where do we need to be in the future? And what things do we need to do? What is that gap that is involved in order to allow us to comply with this law once it goes into effect? What does that mean from a process perspective? What does that mean from a data perspective? Just what does that mean overall? Next, the change phase. This is where we are actually go ahead and make the change. Now, as like the example that I just brought up, sometimes the change is from a process perspective, not so much from a technology perspective, because maybe from a technology perspective, we just need to capture the date that the interview was conducted, and maybe the responses have to get entered into a government issued system that can't even integrate with Salesforce. So let's make believe there's no integration involved whatsoever, but we need to be able to keep track of which records will be the trigger where we do need to comply with this law that's going to come into play. And we need to track whether or not we actually complied with the law, maybe who is the individual that did the thing that needs to be done, and the date that they did it. And that's about it. So from a Salesforce perspective, it's really not that big of a deal. But from a process perspective, it's a very, very big deal. So we go ahead and we start implementing the change that we're talking about. And the next one is the post-change phase. So this is where once the change has been made, we need to make sure, we need to evaluate, we need to sort of like walk through that actual process in order to determine, was it successful? And can everyone actually do it? Are we able to comply with this new process, this new requirement, this new law that landed on our lap? And next we have the consolidation phase. This is where basically we take that new process and it's no longer in training wheels. It's actually live. This is just part of the DNA of how we do things from now on. In other words, we know we've kicked the tires. We know that everyone can actually comply with the law. We can see the records that warrant doing these extra new steps that are part of this new process. Everyone is able to actually fulfill the process. We can actually pull the reports that we need to show all of those successfully completed questionnaires or surveys, whatever it might be. And now this new process is part of our DNA. And the last step is the maintenance phase. And during the maintenance phase, basically, we are checking in just in order to make sure we can't just like drop a bomb and run the other way. So we need to actually make sure, is it still sustainable? Are there new glitches perhaps that might have come up, but our business users didn't necessarily articulate it? Like nobody actually brought it to our attention, but there might be some issues that might require us to tweak the process a little bit, tweak our systems just a little bit before we can consider it to be truly on autopilot. So these are the various phases associated with change management. Now, in order to, I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version for those of you who are familiar with the term Cliff Notes. What is the one thing, if you take away from this entire session, if you take away one thing that you can do to make sure that throughout all of these 5 steps, to eliminate the biggest obstacles, to turn the biggest complainers into your biggest cheerleaders, what is that one thing that you can do for each and every one of these steps? You need to do it consistently in order to make it a success. It's all about communication. Because if you are communicating in advance before we actually roll up our sleeves to do anything, we communicate to the business users, the folks who are going to be impacted by this new change, the fact that this new law is coming into play. Here's a date when it's going to go into effect. Here's what it means. Here's what we are going to do as a company in order to help you comply with this law with the least amount of friction, making it as easy as possible for you to comply with the law. Here's what we are going to do. Here's what our plans are. Here's when we are going to start testing it out with you. Even in that first step, before we actually roll up our sleeves to do anything, you start communicating it right there. And then as you're making the changes, you're still communicating with the business users. By the way, remember, as promised, this new law is coming into place, and here's what we're working on. It's not going to go live for another couple of weeks, but here's a sneak preview of what it's going to look like. It's all about communication. And when you maintain that communication throughout all of these steps, that is the best thing that you could possibly do in order to turn the biggest complainers into the biggest cheerleaders. Because the business users are going to quickly realize that, okay, no one is excited about this new law, but at the very least, our company is making it as easy as possible to comply with it. And I'm not going to be surprised when all of a sudden I log in one day and we're going to have these new alerts or reports or other requirements or steps that I need to do. So the biggest thing that you can do is communicate at every step along the way. All right, let's move along to the next slide. So implementing change management in your project. So in a nutshell, if you're working on any project that requires any change, you need to, and every project does, by the way, you need to make sure to start taking into account some of these concepts associated with change management. So start by putting yourself in the shoes of your end users. Start to empathize with the business users who are going to be impacted by this new change that you're implementing. Put yourself in their mindset. What is it that they do? What are their responsibilities? What are their priorities? What are they trying to accomplish when they log into Salesforce, when they get to that screen that will be impacted by this new enhancement that you're working on? Then start to create a plan for not only making the changes, but also communicating to them about the changes that you're working on. And then, of course, as you're going ahead and implementing the changes, you need to communicate with them, to hear from them, give them a platform, give them a mechanism in order to give you feedback on their concerns, on how it's going for them, on whether or not they understand, they know how to do the things that they are expected to do as it relates to this new law that's coming about, or this enhanced process, or the new automation that you want to give them. You're introducing automation, let's say for case assignment logic, or I want to say case assignment rules, but it might be a flow that you're building out to determine who should get assigned specific cases. You want them to understand, them being the business users, you want them to understand, here is what we are going to implement. Here's why we are implementing it. Here's how you're going to benefit from it, and let them articulate any concerns, any problems, because guess what? Very often, we as Salesforce admins, we are not given the full business requirements. When someone turns to us and say, here's what I want from Salesforce, and it's always going to be the following 2 or 3 options. That's it. It's always, there are never any exceptions. It's always going to be this way. And then you talk to one of the people who are on their team, even someone who reports into the individual who gave you those business requirements, and someone on the team says, that's not always the case. Let me tell you about all of the other exceptions that we need to take into account. For you as the Salesforce admin, wouldn't you like to know about that before you ever roll up your sleeves to start building out whatever it is that you're going to build out? Of course you do. And by opening up that channel of communication with the business users, I'm not at all saying it's a free for all where anyone can say anything they want and you're going to automatically take it into account and implement every suggestion and every complaint. I am not saying that. What I am saying is you need to not only say, but prove to the folks on your team, the business users, your colleagues within the business, you need to show them that you are their ally. You are actually trying to help them. You're not trying to be an obstacle. You're trying to help be the facilitator, the problem solver to help them do their jobs with in the most efficient way possible. So by you communicating to them, here's what's going to happen. You're not coming in like the principal or the teacher saying, oh, guess what? Here's what we're going to do, whether you like it or not. I mean, it could be none of us like it. And this new thing is coming, whether it's like the example I gave before, a new law that's coming down, or senior management decided, come hell or high water, this is the way we're going to do things starting a certain date, regardless of the source of why we're implementing the change or what the change is about. You need to establish for yourself that open line of communication with the team members so that you can make sure, even before you implement anything, that the business requirements are complete, that other exceptions are taken into account, that all of the different kinds of users and different subgroups of users within the team are considered as it relates to this thing and how it's going to play out, because you are much better off knowing that before you start building things out versus you go live with the flow, the integration, the automation, whatever it is that you're building out. You go live with it, and only after you go live, everyone says, yeah, it sucks. And it sucks because it doesn't work for me. Because here's why. Because guess what? Every single time we talk to someone, we don't have their email address. Sometimes people just leave us a voicemail. I know their name, I know their job title, I know their phone number to call them back. I don't have their email address. So if you make the email address a required field, guess what I'm going to do as a sales rep? I'm going to put in fake@gmail.com so that I can save the record. And now we have a whole bunch of crap data in the system. So you need to understand these things. Even if senior management says, I don't care, make the email address field required, you need to understand and to hear back from the business users the justification to say, oh, wait, maybe that's not always the case, so that it can be a conversation with senior management to say, oh, by the way, here's what we heard from these people on the team. And that is how you can position yourself as the ally, as the facilitator, as the problem solver, not only for the business users, but also for senior management. And you're positioning yourself in a way that has a lot more career success than if you were to just be the yes person, the order taker. Oh, someone said I should do this, so I went ahead and I did it. Like, that's it. What else is there to talk about? Anyway, that's essentially how you can implement change management within your project. So now let's talk about 8 tips to help your users adapt to new changes. And again, what you're going to see over here is the common denominator throughout is going to be all about communication. So first, what we're going to do is start with the basics. The first thing you need to explain to them. Here's what's going to change. Here's why it's going to change. Here's when it's going to change. Here's where that change is coming from, whether it's, again, senior management or a colleague, or you happen to stumble across a cool YouTube video that showed something, or regardless of the reason, you need to simply explain to them, open the lines of communication. Here are the basics of what's going on. Here's why we think it's necessary in order to do these things. Next, we need to get buy-in from the users early on. Again, this does not mean unanimous, everybody needs to agree. We need to at least give them the opportunity to articulate What are the concerns that they might have as it relates to this thing that you're talking about? Be clear about what will be changing and when it will be changing. I think we've all been there as Salesforce professionals where we are talking to someone about a particular change, let's say a change, something simple, a change to a page layout, a change to the, let's say, opportunity page layout. And as we are talking to someone or showing them, here's the change on the opportunity page layout. Here, I did it in a sandbox. Is this okay? How, does this work for you? And all of a sudden, the person that you've been working closely with regarding this particular change, they turn to you and they say, okay, so now all of the opportunities that were owned by Joe Schmo, who left last week, they're automatically going to be transferred over to Susan. Like, what? What the heck are you talking about? Like, no, that's not part of the scope of the change that we're focused on. People very quickly, and they're not coming from a malicious place whatsoever. They simply don't necessarily understand, or there might be a lot that's going on within the organization. They might have simply confused multiple conversations or different projects and sort of like melded all of them together in their mind, and that's okay. Well, sometimes I do that myself. But just be very clear about, here's what's going to be changing. Here's when it's going to be changing. Here's the scope of what is included. Here are some of the things that you might think are included, but they're not included. So let's say we're going to go ahead and we're going to change all of the following page layouts. We're going to build all of this automation. But guess what? We are not transferring any records. That's a whole separate thing. We could have a separate conversation about that. You need to be very clear about that. Now, by the way, not only should you be communicating that verbally to your team members, put it in writing. CYA. Cover yourself. So go ahead and put it in writing. Put it in the form of emails. You can post it into Slack or Chatter, depending on whatever channels your team is currently using for communication. And just make it very, very black and white, very clear to your team of what they should be able to expect as it relates to this particular change. Make sure that you identify and you communicate to the team the benefits of the change. And this is where I'm going to go back to the example that I gave you before, where let's say the change that's coming is not even one that we've identified ourselves within the organization. It's a new law that came into play, and none of us are excited about this new law. In fact, we all cringe. We hate the fact that this new law is going to go live. We're terrified of all of the work that we think is involved with it. How can you put a positive spin on it? Well, the benefit is by the changes that you are implementing into the system, you're going to make it as painless as possible for your team to comply with the law. That's a huge benefit. You're actually, by doing that, by communicating it in that way, you're actually taking the negative and you're not only trying to turn it into a positive by saying, hey, I'm going to make it as easy as possible for you. And here's how I'm going to make it as easy as possible for you to comply with the law. You can also find some way to articulate your empathy of the fact that you're also not too excited about this new law that's coming down. But hey, we have to comply with it because we're in this particular industry. This law still applies to us. So we have no choice but to comply with this particular thing that's coming down. Number 5, communicate. I've talked about that already. I don't think I need to harp on it all that much more. Number 6, this is so incredibly important. Oh my God, it took me a long time to actually learn this one. Believe it or not, to be patient. You have to remember the folks that you're working with, the folks who are justifying your existence within the organization as a Salesforce admin, they are the ones who are dealing with a whole lot. They are dealing with the customers who are complaining to them or on the phone. They are dealing with senior managers who are giving them sales quotas that they have to meet by the end of the month or the end of the quarter. They are dealing with trying to learn not only Salesforce, but other systems that are being used within your organization. They are also drowning in their inbox with emails that are coming in from all kinds of places. So we need to be patient and understanding and empathetic with everything that they are going through. I'm not at all saying that we need to just give up on making changes because, hey, they're overwhelmed, so like we don't want to bother them. No, you need to empathize with them. And you also need to realize that sometimes there are certain individuals where change is more difficult for them as a person than some of their colleagues. And we need to sometimes adjust our communication style, our tone, the way we work with people based on what they are capable of, the way they think, the way they understand certain things in as it relates to technology in particular. So you really need to be patient. Next, you need to be prepared to answer questions. You need to address their concerns. The communication that I'm talking about is not a one-way communication of you communicating to them. Hey, here's what's coming and here's when it's coming. You also need to make it very clear that you are open to receiving the communication and the feedback and the insights and the struggles and the frustration that the team is dealing with. I'm going to give you an example of this on a much bigger scale than simply a new law coming into play. So typically, when I'm working on a project where we're rolling out a brand new Salesforce implementation, so the company has not worked in Salesforce before, and I am coming in as the consultant, myself and my team, in order to configure Salesforce, to migrate their data, to train their users, and starting a particular day, that's it. They're expected, we're unplugging the old system, they're expected to only use Salesforce. These folks are majorly overwhelmed, okay? Learning Salesforce is not at the top of their priority list. It might be at the top of our priority list to teach them to graduate from the project, but it's not on the top of their priority list. When they are first logging in, they are very stressed, very overwhelmed. What is it that I typically do when I've done all of the things that I just mentioned? I typically set up office hours. And you could set up office hours. It could be once a week. It could be maybe for the first 2 or 3 weeks. It's going to be 1 hour a day, let's say Monday through Friday. So pick a time slot, let's say 11 a.m. to 12 noon, where you set up, let's say, a recurring Zoom meeting. You send a calendar invite out to all of the people who are impacted by this change. So in this case, it would be all of the Salesforce users. You go ahead and you send them the calendar invite so it's on their calendar. And all you're doing is you're joining that Zoom meeting. It's open Q&A. This is an opportunity for them to log on to the Zoom meeting and share with you, here's what I'm struggling with. Here's what I still don't know how to do. When I log into the system, I still don't know how to find my tier 1 customers. I still don't know how to pull my pipeline, or I pull my pipeline, but here's what I'm not seeing and what I'm expecting to see when I go ahead and pull my pipeline. When I go ahead and I log my activities, they simply disappear. I don't know how to find them anymore. How do I find those tasks that I created yesterday? I don't know where to find them. By you creating that office hours and by setting it up with some level of recurrence, and over time, you can absolutely, dwindle them down. You don't need to do this forever, but for especially at the beginning of rolling out some type of new enhancement, some new change, you need to give your team an open channel. You don't want to be bombarded. So you don't want to be flooded with emails or text messages or chatter messages or Slack messages. But by having the open office hours, you're essentially inviting everyone to come in and to complain, to raise a question, to come up with other enhancement requests. And by the way, just by doing that, and by communicating it out to the entire team and reminding everyone how you have open office hours. I'm looking forward to sending an email out. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone tomorrow at 11 a.m. for office hours if you have any questions, blah, blah, blah. So when you go ahead and you do that, the folks who are their blood is boiling, steam is coming out of their ears. They're so frustrated by all things Salesforce. You are totally deflating their entire argument when they want to turn to their boss and say, yeah, I can't use Salesforce because it's hard to use, or I still don't know how to use it. Or that person who did the training I still don't understand things. Because by you repeatedly sharing out to the rest of the team how you are available to answer any questions and to have dialogue about any frustrations or any problems or any issues that the team is experiencing, you are getting ahead of the curve by essentially not allowing anyone on the team to just go behind your back and complain that this thing sucks, because you've made it abundantly clear that you're available to answer any question that they have, and they are simply not taking it up. Instead of taking it up, they're just going around complaining. And for most folks, they are not walking around with any malicious intent, with any real, I mean, there are a few, but very few people are walking around with like a real negative attitude. And even if they are, so even if they are narrow-minded and they're difficult and they're coming with a malicious whatever, they want to just push back, and then they are determined to say that whatever you do sucks and that Salesforce sucks and they're better off using their Excel spreadsheet. Even if they come to these office hours and they complain to you like, yeah, Salesforce sucks. I go ahead and I put in all these tasks and I assign it to myself or people on my team, and then I don't see it. It falls into a black hole and everything sucks. And then you show them live in the Zoom meeting, you show them how to pull a list view, how to pull a report, and how to see all of those things. They have nothing to complain about. And you just solved a major problem for them. And that's where you're going to turn those people around, because usually the people who are the biggest complainers, once they realize that you're on their side and you solve their problem, they're the extrovert, the type A personality. They're going to go around, they're going to start bragging about you to everyone else on the team. And they're going to start sharing with everybody else how freaking awesome it was that you solved their problem live on the spot within a couple of minutes, and you didn't do any prep work in advance. That's a huge, huge deal. Lastly, what you need to do is you need to celebrate their successes. When someone does things well, and sometimes that means just pulling a pipeline report or seeing all of their dormant customers and to start a, let's say, a calling initiative to start reaching out to those dormant customers to start working on them. Go ahead and start celebrating their successes. A little pat on the back. I mean, we've all seen how Salesforce users get all excited about confetti. Like, it does not take much. We ourselves go to a Salesforce event and we're excited to get a freaking sticker like we're 4 years old. It does not take much to make people happy. You don't even have to buy them a Starbucks gift card. Simply acknowledge that they've learned the new thing, that they've adopted the new thing. Send a message out to other folks on the team about how cool it is that Joe learned how to do X, Y, and Z, whatever it was that Joe was struggling with. And that will go a long way in order to start turning around those other naysayers who might be a little bit quieter, behind the under the surface, complaining quietly, and you're going to immediately quash any of those complaints before they even get a little bit louder. That's a very big deal, by the way. Okay, next, let's talk about 3 of the most common challenges associated with change management and how you can overcome them. So the first one, no surprise, we're talking about lack of communication. I think I've stressed that enough. I don't need to harp on it anymore, but usually people just forget to communicate to folks on the team. Here's the thing that you're going to start seeing as of tomorrow morning, as of Monday morning. Here's the new thing. Here's why we are introducing it. Here's where you can reach out for additional help. So simply lack of communication. Make sure you're communicating frequently and clearly so that the business users know what's going on. Next, lack of buy-in. Make sure that your users are involved. So it's one thing to communicate. It's another thing to get them to be involved. That's the two-way communication that I've been talking about quite a bit. Make sure they understand the benefits of the changes that are being introduced. Resistance to change. Do not ignore the resistance. You need to engage with those folks who are resistant in order to understand why they are resistant. They might have completely legitimate reasons why they are resistant to that particular change. So when you do identify resistance, Don't ignore it. Don't be confrontational about it. Put on your therapist hat. Even if you have no training as a therapist, simply engage with those people, asking questions. Talk to me a little bit about why you think this thing won't succeed. Tell me what your concerns are regarding this initiative that we are working on. That's all you really need to do in order to start turning people around and getting their buy in with not getting their buy-in with the initiative, but also helping you by identifying some additional nuances, some exceptions, some business requirements, some additional things that maybe were never brought up before by anyone else as it relates to this particular initiative. And lastly, we're going to talk about how to do it when you do it properly. What are some of the benefits that you're going to experience? Well, when you address change management properly, if you do all of the things that I talked about so far in this presentation, you're going to have better user adoption. By the way, when you have better adoption, you have better data quality. When you have better data quality, people are relying even more on the system of record, which is typically, in our case, Salesforce. You have increased collaboration among teams. And when I say increased collaboration, what I'm talking about, I'm not talking about Slack or Chatter or anything else. What I'm talking about is by having an open line of communication to the folks on the team to tell them, by the way, here are the changes that are coming. Here's why it's coming. Here's what it's going to look like for you, and open up the lines of communication. If you have any questions, any concerns, any issues, go ahead and talk to me about it. When people start bringing up those concerns, and you are then bringing back the senior leaders who are maybe responsible for the change itself, or responsible for making sure that everyone is working in a compatible way, cohesively as one organization. You are the one who is facilitating collaboration among the different groups of team members within your organization. So not only are you facilitating collaboration among your team, but you are perceived as the one who is connecting those dots as the problem solver, even if that simply means bringing everyone to the table so that they can have the conversation about here are the issues, the concerns, the problems that they foresee as it relates to this particular initiative that you're working on. Having increased buy-in from your users is another benefit that you're going to get by doing it properly. Next, you're going to have faster improvements to the internal business processes and the use of technology, because by eliminating the resistance, your projects are going to go faster. Your projects are going to go live faster. People are going to start celebrating the fact that the project went live instead of falling on dead silence. It will also eliminate internal squabbling and politics when everyone realizes that we're all really on the same page. We're all trying to comply with this law because we don't like it either, but we have this law that's going into effect on whatever date, and we are all working in our best way to make it as painless as possible for everyone on the team to comply with the law, so it gets rid of internal fights. Instead, those internal debates turn into internal collaborative conversations so that everyone is working towards the same goal. And it also results in an improved overall project success rate, because none of us want to go live with any project only to discover that nobody is using the new features that we rolled out, or using the new system that we rolled out, or the new fields that we rolled out, or the new reports and dashboards that we rolled out. To us as Salesforce admins, that is probably the equivalent of someone stepping on our face. It hurts. I've been there. I know. But by doing all of the things that I talked about, it's going to essentially eliminate all of that and turn your projects into successes within the organization. So without further delay, let's switch over to questions. And I did see a couple of, I think they were only comments, but not even questions. So let's see what kind of comments we have over here. I was hoping, so Gary's got this comment. I was hoping you were going to demonstrate a killer change management system in Salesforce. I'll tell you, that's actually, I'm really glad that you brought that up. So, um, change management is more about handling relationships and communication with people and less about a particular system. I am not familiar with any app of any kind to help with change management. Change management is more about uh, the like I said before, the communication and the empathy that you are expressing and the support that you are providing to the folks on the team as it relates to any change that is being introduced at all. And by the way, if you really wanted to track the progress of change management in Salesforce, you could always repurpose. When I say repurpose, I'm assuming that the organization is already using the cases object in Salesforce for customer support or for any other reason, but you can absolutely leverage the cases object in Salesforce to not only track your internal projects, but you could also leverage some checklists or reminders within that project regarding the communication elements that for each stage along the progress of your project, that the appropriate communication channels are not only open, but they're actually utilized across the team. Let me see what else we have over here. Marshall, excellent point. Overwhelmed is something we tend to forget about others as we sit in our own goldfish bowl. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I am talking to a business leader. Sometimes it's a sales manager, a sales director, sometimes it's a CEO, and they are expressing to me, here's what we need from the system. And I know for a fact that some of their peers on their team, some of their direct reports, don't operate that way. And it's not that they don't operate that way because they are being deviant in any way. The actual real life requirements out in the field by the worker bees is a slightly different than what the managers understand it to be. And not only is that the case, but a lot of times folks will say, oh no, it's not only for me and it's not only for my team, it's everyone in sales needs this. That's not always the case. So yes, very often folks get so narrowed down in their own world and so narrowly focused that it becomes really challenging to understand that you might have some colleagues that might do things a little bit differently. Yershan has a question here. How do you work with people that are constantly refusing the changes and to learn new things? So this is a very realistic problem. And I feel your pain. Again, going back to the communication, when you open the lines of communication by, and sometimes it has to be on a one by one basis, meaning you identify the biggest complainer on the team and set up a meeting with that person, just that person, give them an opportunity to vent, to complain, to express all of the things that they are concerned about. Sometimes it's just that people have trouble adjusting to change. Sometimes the issue is that people are afraid of technology. More often than not, the issue, the real root cause of the issue, is that people are concerned that their area of expertise, the things that they are known for, the things that they are comfortable with, are now disappearing by doing it in this other way. So for example, I used to track all of my, let's say, all of my deals in Excel. And by doing it in Excel, I was able to create all of these really cool charts and reports and metrics. And I was able to create totals and subtotals and filters. And I used to do all of that in Excel, and that was freaking amazing. And by forcing me to use Salesforce, I am no longer in control. And I have no idea how to replicate all of the things that I used to do in Excel. So this is a very common issue, by the way. this one's straight out. And just by sitting with that person and by identifying, well, what are the filters and what are the reports and what are the dashboards and what are the different kinds of metrics and what are the charts and how do you have the different tabs on the bottom over there organized? But just by understanding that and then by showing them, here's how we could do it in Salesforce. Again, you're going to turn the biggest complainers into your biggest cheerleaders, because then they're going to realize, oh, wait a minute, the way I've been doing it up until now in Excel, I mean, yeah, it's really cool, and yeah, that's my comfort level, but it would take me 4 days to do this thing, and I would have to do it every single week for 4 days just to be able to get to the output of what I'm so proud of in this Excel spreadsheet. And basically what you're showing them is you've essentially automated those, you've given them back those 4 days by automating all of those filters, all of those charts, all of those metrics that they worked so hard to do. So you really need to address it on a one-by-one basis in order to help overcome some of these challenges that some people have. Now, again, sometimes it's not even about their area of expertise. It's not about their ego. It's just that they are afraid of learning new things. They're afraid of technology. So you need to really handle each of these situations on a personalized basis. By doing that, I guarantee that you will be able to 90% of the time, not 100% of the time. There are going to be some times where people are not applying logic. They have their own wild and crazy ideas. Things should be a certain way for no reason whatsoever other than because I say so. And guess what? For those people, there's not a whole lot that you can do. And what I typically do in those scenarios is I step aside and I let that person create their own catastrophe. Let them self-destruct, not on my watch. But anyway, it does not look like there are any other questions. So with that, we are going to wrap it up. I want to thank all of you for joining me today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.